me if I ever say that again, that I may not be invited back in the bedroom. So I gotta be careful. We've been together almost 21 years.
John McEnroe admits it, and the fact that even he had to say it out loud tells you everything. Sinner just made every Grand Slam champion on this planet look like a beginner. Think about what it took for that sentence to leave McEnroe's mouth. 7 Grand Slam titles. The loudest, most defiant voice in tennis history. A man who never handed anyone anything, not a point, not a compliment, not an inch. He sat down on a live broadcast call 2 days ago, looked at the entire French Open draw, and admitted it. Sinner against everybody else. He'd take Sinner, full stop. That means Djokovic. 24 Grand Slams. Is a beginner now. Federer built a 20-year dynasty. Apparently that counts for nothing. Nadal won this specific tournament 14 times on this specific clay. McEnroe himself won 7 majors. He just called his own generation beginners and didn't blink. This is what 29 straight wins does. This is what sweeping all 5 Masters titles to open a season does. This is what arriving at the only Grand Slam you've never won, after losing a final you had 3 match points to close, does to a man's reputation. Subscribe now. This conversation goes much deeper than one quote.
Is to recover as much as I can in the next 2-3 days. There is not going to be a lot of training.
Because what McEnroe admitted has consequences nobody in tennis is ready to deal with yet. Let's start with McEnroe himself. Because the admission didn't come from nowhere. This is a man who spent his entire career refusing to yield to anyone. He argued with umpires. He argued with crowds. He argued with the sport itself. When McEnroe says something that generous about another player, publicly, on record, without being pushed, that's not commentary. That's a confession extracted under the weight of evidence he could no longer argue against. And the evidence has been building for 3 months straight. Since February 19, Sinner has not lost a single match. Not one. He didn't just win tournaments during that stretch. He suffocated them. Indian Wells fell first. He went through that entire desert draw without dropping a set. Straight sets, straight sets, straight sets, all the way to the trophy. Miami came next. Same story. The Sunshine Double completed without a blemish, and the tennis world started paying attention in a different way. Not the way they pay attention when someone is playing well, the way they pay attention when something feels genuinely wrong for everyone else on the tour. Then clay arrived, and Sinner didn't slow down, he accelerated. Monte Carlo, Madrid, Rome. 3 clay court Masters events, all 3 won. He became the first man since Rafael Nadal in 2010 to sweep all 3 in the same season. And that comparison to Nadal is not thrown around casually in this sport. Nadal on clay is the most dominant force any surface has ever produced in professional tennis. 14 French Open titles. 91 clay wins in a single year at his peak. To be mentioned in the same breath as what Nadal did on this surface. That's the moment you understand the scale of what Sinner is doing right now. But it gets more specific than that. Winning the Rome title last week made Sinner only the second in history to complete the career Golden Masters. All 9 ATP Masters 1000 trophies won at least once. The first man to do it was Novak Djokovic, the man with 24 Grand Slams. The man McEnroe just indirectly filed under irrelevant when he said the field had no answer for Sinner. So the same player McEnroe is essentially dismissing at this French Open is the only other human being on the planet who has done what Sinner did in Rome last Sunday. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And the pattern points in one direction. Now here is where the title starts cutting deeper than people realize. McEnroe didn't just say Sinner was the favorite. Favorites exist at every tournament. Djokovic was the favorite at the 2011 French Open, carrying a 43-match winning streak and had just beaten Nadal twice on clay leading in. He still lost. Federer ended that streak in the semifinal. Being the favorite at Roland Garros means almost nothing historically. This court has destroyed more certainties than any other surface in the sport. What McEnroe said was categorically different. He said it was Sinner against the field. That framing doesn't describe a favorite. It describes a separation, a different category. A man standing on one side of a line with everyone else crowded on the other side, and McEnroe, 7 Grand Slams, seen everything, doubted everyone, looking at that line and admitting the gap is real. So when the title says Sinner made every Grand Slam champion look like a beginner, the word beginner isn't an insult aimed at those players personally. It's a statement about context. It's saying that the standards Sinner is operating at right now have shifted what it means to be elite in this sport. Djokovic, at 38, carrying a shoulder injury, having played only 3 tournaments all year and only 1 match, on clay coming into Paris, standing next to a 4-year-old who is 17-0 on clay this season. That contrast is where the word beginner lives, not in Djokovic's career, in this specific moment, in this specific draw, right now. Federer's 20 titles didn't prepare the current generation for this. Nadal's clay empire didn't either, because both of those dynasties existed in a tennis world where the physical ceiling of the sport was still being discovered. Sinner is playing at a ceiling nobody in the previous generation knew existed. McEnroe said it himself at the 2025 French Open. The level of tennis Sinner and Alcaraz are producing is higher than anything he has ever witnessed. Higher than Federer versus Nadal. Higher than his own era. He said that 12 months ago and got ridiculed for it. Now he's sitting in front of the press saying Sinner alone is worth taking over the entire rest of the field. His own position has gotten more extreme, not less. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question this whole conversation is really about. If Sinner wins the French Open starting tomorrow, and the bookmakers have him at -275, implying a 70% chance, the second strongest odds ever recorded for any man at a major, with only Nadal's peak clay odds sitting higher. Then at 24 years old, he completes the career Grand Slam, wins at all 4 majors. A feat only 6 men in the Open era have achieved: Rod Laver, Andre Agassi, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, and Carlos Alcaraz, who completed it at this year's Australian Open at 22 years old. Alcaraz completing his career Grand Slam at 22 felt like the headline of 2026. Then Alcaraz injured his wrist in April, withdrew from Madrid, Rome, the French Open, and has now confirmed he will also miss Wimbledon. The man who saved 3 match points against Sinner in last year's 5-hour and 29-minute French Open final, the longest final in the history of this tournament, is watching from home. The rivalry that was supposed to define the next decade of tennis has been cut in half by a wrist injury, and the stage Alcaraz vacated has been handed, entirely and completely, to Sinner. This is the other dimension of the beginner framing that nobody is talking about loudly enough. It's not just the current field that looks reduced. It's what Sinner's trajectory does to the historical record. Right now he has 4 Grand Slams at 24. Federer had 4 Grand Slams at 24. But Federer at 24 had not yet completed the career Golden Masters, had not swept 3 consecutive Clay Masters in the same season, and had not arrived at Roland Garros on a 29-winning streak against the weakest top 10 field in recent memory. The pace of Sinner's accumulation is the thing that rewrites comparisons. McEnroe was actually more measured about the long-term picture than the headlines suggested. He said he doesn't believe Sinner will reach 20 or 22 or 24 Grand Slams, the tallies of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic respectively. He cited the depth in the modern game, the bigger hitters, the unpredictability. But that caveat didn't soften what he said about right now. Long-term projections and present-day dominance are 2 separate conversations, and McEnroe was very clear about which one he was having on that call. The present-day conversation had one answer: Sinner. Now think about what Sinner himself is walking into tomorrow. He arrives at Roland Garros knowing he had this title last year and lost it. 3 match points. A 2-set lead against Alcaraz before the Spaniard mounted one of the greatest comebacks in Grand Slam final history. Alcaraz won the 5th set 7-6 in a super tiebreak and the crowd erupted. Sinner walked off that court with nothing but a statistic: the longest French Open final ever played, and a wound that the entire tennis world wondered if he could recover from. 5 weeks later, he won Wimbledon. beat Alcaraz again on the surface. Alcaraz had won in 2023 and 2024, finished 2025 by defending his ATP Finals title in Turin, started 2026 by walking into the Australian Open as two-time defending champion, getting beaten in 5 sets in the semifinal by a 38-year-old Djokovic in the match of his year, and then responding by going unbeaten for the next 3 months and winning everything he entered. That is not the profile of a player who collapses under pressure. That is the profile of a player who gets better specifically when the pressure is highest, which is exactly what makes tomorrow terrifying for the rest of the draw. Todd Woodbridge, the Australian doubles legend, put it plainly this week. He said Sinner is the heaviest favorite he has seen at a Grand Slam in a long time. Heavier than any favorite in the Federer-Nadal era, because back then at least both existed as genuine threats to each other. Right now there is no equivalent threat to Sinner. Woodbridge also said the greatest challenge Sinner faces is himself, the pressure of the streak, the weight of history, the memory of last year's final. That internal battle, Woodbridge said, will be more dangerous than anything the draw can produce. That is worth sitting with for a moment. The most dangerous opponent for the world #1, carrying a 29-match winning streak, ranked as the second strongest favorite in major tennis history, is his own mind. Not Djokovic, who is in the opposite half of the draw and hasn't played a clay match all season besides one warm-up. Not Zverev, who lost to Darderi in Rome after wasting multiple match points and arrived in Paris carrying that failure. Not Fils, who has the crowd and the emotion and the red clay in his blood, but has never been past the quarterfinal at a Grand Slam. The danger is internal, and Sinner, by every observable measure across the last 3 months, has already beaten it. The last man to enter a Grand Slam with this level of statistical dominance and this kind of narrative weight was Djokovic's self in 2011. He carried a 43-match winning streak into Roland Garros that year, having beaten Nadal in both the Madrid and Rome finals. The tennis world assumed that streak would end with a Djokovic title in Paris. Federer had other ideas, beating him in the semifinal and snapping that streak at match 43. Sinner is currently at 29. He has 14 more wins of room before he even reaches the threshold Djokovic couldn't clear. And unlike 2011, Federer is not in this draw. Nadal is not in this draw. Alcaraz is not in this draw. The obstacle that ended Djokovic's historic run does not exist in 2026. That absence is the final, defining piece of context behind what McEnroe admitted. He wasn't just saying Sinner is the best player in the world right now. Everyone already knew that. He was saying the specific combination of form, opposition, draw, and moment has produced a window that may not open this cleanly again for years. And a 7-time Grand Slam champion looked at that window and told the world in plain language, it belongs to Sinner. Every Grand Slam champion who built their legacy on this court, Laver, Agassi, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, arrived at their defining moments against fields that fought back. Sinner arrives at his with the field already reduced, already injured, already watching from home. He doesn't get less credit for that. The streak happened before the draw was announced. The Golden Masters happened before Alcaraz got hurt. The 17-0 clay record happened against opponents who were fully healthy and fully motivated. Context explains the opportunity. It doesn't diminish the player who created it. McEnroe understands that better than most. That's what made the admission worth something. It didn't come from a commentator filling airtime. It came from a man who spent 50 years watching this sport resist being summarized, resist being predicted, resist being handed to anyone, and even he couldn't find a counter-argument this time. Roland Garros starts tomorrow. Sinner opens against Clement Tabur, a French wildcard ranked 165th in the world who has never beaten a top 10 player. The crowd will back Tabur loudly. It won't matter. Nothing about this first week will matter unless Sinner's mind betrays him. And based on everything he has shown since February, it won't. The real conversation begins in the second week. Zverev is the most credible threat remaining, seeded second, with the kind of heavy clay court game that has taken sets off Sinners before. Djokovic is the most dangerous wild card, not because of his form, but because of his history on this court and his ability to produce five-set performances that defy everything his age and injury records suggest. If either of them reaches the final, this tournament gets its drama. But right now, on May 23, 2026, the morning before the first ball is struck at Roland Garros, the honest answer to every question this draw is asking is the same one McEnroe gave. One man, one name, and a sport full of former Grand Slam champions who suddenly look like they're still figuring out how the game is played. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Because the next 2 weeks are going to produce moments this channel will be breaking down in real time, and you do not want to be catching up after the fact. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's watch this together.